Thank you. My name again is Maggi, and I'm what is called a public historian. And what that means is that it's been my career for the last 25 years. I do it for money and income. Before that, I was what I was known as an avocational historian. Beginning around 1989 when I accidentally got appointed to the San Jose Landmarks Commission. About 10 years after that, when I started getting into the business, then I decided, well, I actually needed to be identified as a historian, so I got listed with the state of California. So that's what public historians are. But I'm gonna, and what actually got me interested in local history was during the 90s, early 90s or late 80s, I started getting into genealogy, and I was able to trace back that one of my ancestors was actually one of the founders of San Jose, Felipe Santiago Tapia. And that led me into learning about California history all the way back to its beginnings after the Native American era. So what I'm going to talk about today is this particular project, which I did for the San Jose Planning Division, and it came out of it's a report that my company and I prepared, although I was the author for this particular report. The other part of that, you heard a while back Krista Van Land speak here, and she was the other half of that team. She's also a public historian.
Franklin, can I just clarify that you will not be presenting this presentation on Friday, the 24th? So that's okay. I just wanted everybody to know.
I was thinking it was the 24th, but I got corrected in time so that I didn't show up 2 days later. Historic context statements are like books, except that they're prepared as technical documents to the government process. So local historic significance is an important part of local government, determining significance because it affects whether or not buildings can end up being demolished or if they can become landmarks. And all of the local agencies throughout California prepare these types of documents. The primary document in San Jose is called the San Jose Historic Context Statement 2021, which is when it's last updated. And if you search on that, or just search on historic context statements, you can actually download all of them. There's a whole bunch of them. There's the main one, and then there's a bunch of subsidiary ones which address themes, various themes in San Jose's history. This particular one arose out of a problem that occurred when a neighborhood off the Alameda wanted to become a local landmark district. It's now called the Shelley Subdivision and Alameda Park City Landmark District. It's 132 properties, and it was designated formally by the City Council last fall. During the initial nomination proceedings, it became known that this subdivision, the Alameda Park portion of the subdivision had restrictive covenants on it that restrict when it was built in 1922 that only allowed Caucasians to buy houses. So that became a big issue with the City Council and what that means, and what that means on other subdivisions throughout the city and whether or not they should be landmarked. So this kind of spun around for a couple of years, and then finally, when the council decided to proceed with this particular nomination, they wanted to know what the story was, and that was our job to flush out that material. So this can be found online. This is the name of it right here, and if you look on it's on the San Jose Planning Division's website, and you can download the PDF or read it. So, so let me figure out where I was gonna start here. So why don't we get the next slide?
Okay, can we get the lights, please?
You want them on?
We want the lights on, yes.
No, because there's a lot of reflection.
There's a big glare.
Oh, it's a glare?
Yeah.
Oh,
You can go to the next slide.
okay.
And this one is kind of hard to reach, but the presentation today is mainly going to be about maps, because this context statement identified a number of key maps all the way up to 1941 that helped define how the city grew, and how that relates to issues of racial equity is that we were trying to figure out how the city grew and how that, and then overlay a context of how that affect the racial and ethnic distribution throughout the city. This is a 1988 map, I think, of the city, and it shows the 1886, and it shows the boundaries of the city at that time, which was when the Shelley subdivision was developed. So it kind of all relates back to this landmark district. Next slide. Can you go to the next slide? So there's two I want to read, and this is in Greater San Jose in the 19th century, racial discrimination and the related inequitable outcomes from residential segregation affected urban and rural life of marginalized communities such as Asians, Native Americans, Hispanics, and African Americans. The influx of immigrants from Southern Europe and Mexico beginning at the end of the century, Pacific Islanders during the early 20th century, and African Americans out of the South after World War I saw new ways in which residential segregation was enacted that affected larger issues of equity in our society. Next slide. These new forms of institutionalized discrimination were first attempted through residential zoning restrictions, but ultimately grew during the second decade of the 20th century into the private use of restrictive covenants for new suburban residential tracts. Discrimination gained federal support during the Great Depression in the 1930s when federal programs to guarantee private mortgage lending further exacerbated the inequities of choice for those communities when individuals were acquiring residential properties. In other words, the federal government would not guarantee loans if you were in certain racial groups. Next slide. Anyway, this starts the presentation of the main story of this presentation. So the first recorded mapping of the city occurred during late 1846 and early 47, when the town's junta, or appointed town council, first hired local immigrant settlers from the United States, William Campbell and his brother Thomas, to survey the Mexican pueblo for future building lots. Next slide. Go to the next slide because I'll explain this. So prior to that time, the pueblo, which is what all of these show where all the adobes were, had grown basically at the axis of three roads. One road went to Monterey, one road went to Santa Clara, the other one went to Mission San Jose. And it was at that time a typical Spanish colonial layout, which was that it was seemingly random as opposed to the American system of grids. It was based on a waterway, which there were two. There were the acequia, which flowed to the west of the Market Street, and then the Sanjun, which was on the other side. And go ahead.
So is the current map superimposed on that then? Is that what we're seeing here? Like
Yeah.
The city
Yeah.
wasn't
That-
there.
that's
Okay.
the
Okay. Sorry,
future
just wanted
map.
to make sure. Got it.
Next slide.
That's the Guadalupe River on the left.
Yeah. So, when, the original mapping occurred in 46, this is not the map. The original map went to 8th Street, which was right, here. And, it went, and then went to the north to, Julian Street, and to the south to what became, William Street, or is it Reed? Reed Street. And that map served for about a half a year, but it laid out the basic blocks in the downtown core, and the lots. Although it was done by these American surveyors, the lots were based on the Spanish solar, which is 137 feet by 137 feet. So all of the lots, and my house on 10th Street is 137 feet deep. You know, it's like this system still exists. And that was based on 50 varas by 50 varas, and a vara is a little less than 3 feet. So all of the equipment they had back then in terms of change was big. It was that they used to measure were Spanish. So that's how we ended up with the downtown that was using Spanish measurement. Anyway, this a year later, Chester Lyman came to town, and he had been trained at Yale, and he fixed the original one, and then expanded it a little bit to the east, and by then, the new junta had the whole east side of San Jose surveyed, and split into so-called 500-acre lots, and those were auctioned off, or there was a lottery to all of the heads of family in the town, and they were granted, but later forfeited because it was a mess. So you want to go to the?
Yeah, let me just say, for those of you who are a little bit distant, so it's hard to see, this is Market Street, and this is, I'm not sure. Do you know what the street is?
Julian Street.
Julian Street. And then it goes up to like 11th.
Yeah, sort of.
And then this is Reed over here. So this downtown, well, one of the squares was gonna be Washington Square, which is where now San Jose State is. But that's in 1848. And William Campbell, who had done the earlier survey, was not a really qualified surveyor. So we don't really have his.
No, we do now.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, I actually just found it last year. It's at the archives.
It doesn't look anywhere near as nice as this one though.
Yeah, it's
So,
hard
yeah.
to read.
Yeah, this is 1848, and I think he uses the word junta, but I've heard the word common council.
Yeah.
So that's probably the more official word is common council. I think you might be calling it a junta because they were bilingual.
Yeah, I think Common Council wasn't until it actually was formed as a city.
No, it was 1846. They called it a common council, I think. But yeah, that's what it was. It was bilingual and bicultural. They had both Spanish speaking and English speaking.
Now, this map is called the original survey. So that's different to a later map, which I'll show you, which is called the original city. And it's at least for me, it's really important to distinguish the two. Next one. Also at that time, when Chester Lyman was doing his survey, he surveyed all of the current adobes on the west side of the original survey, and also identified who the property owners were.
You want to show them where the adobes were? I think it's pretty obvious, but for those people sitting back, it's harder to see.
Yeah, this is the park right here, Market Park, and then the adobes go as far south as San Salvador and up to Julian.
They're kind of brownish in color. Can you see them? They're kind of squares or rectangles.
Okay, this is a map of the 500 acre lot survey, and there's about 4 different versions of this map that can be found in various archives. The reason why there's so many is because in the 1860s, when everybody's suing each other to try to figure out who owned what property, they had hired a number of residents had hired surveyors to go out there and try to figure out where the lines were. Some of the maps also showed who all the property owners were, but that changed, and because most of it was considered invalid, but a lot of them continued on, but they got resold really quickly, so owners have kept on changing. Next map.
So these were areas where they grazed their cattle mostly?
At the time when it was sold, it was, the land was owned by the Pueblo as opposed to lands owned by the mission. The mission owned basically everything this way. And it was called, and I'll probably pronounce this a Spanish word, eagles, they were called eagles.
Ejidos.
Which is the common lands, and it's mainly used for cattle slaughtering, because the most of the cattle raising was on the ranchos.
And then would you just point out what's north and south on this map?
North is that way. So,
Ready for the next one?
yeah. This is another version of the 500 acre lots. This is probably the best one. Next.
Next slide?
Yeah. Now this map here, which is very hard to read, might be easier to read over on that one, is the identified first map of the original city. And a surveyor by the name of Baster came into town and started helping some of the large, becoming landowners. And he was hired by Reed to survey his lands, but he ended up serving all of the lands in the greater downtown that were being looked at for future development. Next map.
Notice that on the bottom right it says Pueblo de San Jose.
This is the actual formal original city done by Thomas White a year later, and much more distinct, and shows where the city was going to grow for the next 100 years.
Okay, so why was this one called the original city? Because San Jose incorporated in 1850. And that's what, they needed a map to show where they were incorporating.
And the lines down here, they follow the edge of Reed's property, then follow the Coyote Creek up to Heading Street, then called Rosa, and then came across, this up here was actually not a part of the city. And then it came over here to, I think it was 660 feet beyond the Guadalupe, and then it was a straight line all the way down to here.
Can you show them where the Guadalupe is?
Here.
Where's the Guadalupe?
So the Guadalupe is right here. There's a couple of versions of this map.
Are those squares on the left side anything? Do they represent something?
They represent somebody drawing on this map, which is the original Pueblo over on near Hobson Street. But because the original Pueblo was more in that format, but never.
What are the big white squares?
Yeah, I think it's representing the original Pueblo.
Oh, okay.
That
Thank
it was,
you.
used to be on First and Hobson Street.
Is that supposed to be like an enlarged part of the downtown?
No, I think it was just a surveyor's little thing he put on there.
Okay. Next.
Next. So, my predecessor in my company, Glorianne Laffey, the late Glorianne Laffey, she got obsessed with looking at tax assessments at History San Jose from the 1850s, and she created this map to show how the city developed in its first 10 years. And she has it broken out by colors. Next. And here's just a kind of image from the 1850s of how quickly the town developed. It was, within the city's context statement, I have a name for it now, I'm blanking on it, but it's
Like a boom town.
it was a boom town. Next slide. So by the 1860s, the ownership over the ranchos was kind of coming generally to a close, and the city council itself was trying to figure out what land they owned. And this is the U.S. Surveyor General's map of what lands were considered owned by the city or the pueblo at that point. And this, you can find this map online from a number of different sources. Next map. So when I was trying to figure out my own approach to how the city developed, I drew this map to show the breakout of the original city in terms of who owned what. So if you look at this, this is the original survey, and then these are the 5 property owners, and then there's a lot of kind of unknown land. So those property owners created subdivisions which didn't get developed for a very long time, but basically conformed to the grid as we know it today.
And these property owners got their land from the land commission?
No, this was part of wheeling and dealing that happened in the late 1840s. It's, there was a lot of power politics going on. And if you do look at the context on the planning division's website, I have history on all 5 of those properties, of who those people were. Next slide. We can go to the next slide. So this is another map. Let me get this up over here. On this map, I tried to identify how the city began to grow beyond the original city, which is in blue here. And I'd like to point out these. So it was surrounded by a bunch of ranchos. There were many more ranchos in the county, but these are the adjacent ranchos, which is Rancho Santa Teresa, Rancho San Juan Bautista, Rancho Los Coches, Rancho El Portuero de Santa Clara, and Rancho Pala, and Rancho Yerba Buena. So within these is this huge Pueblo tract, which is owned by the city, which is to the south and the east and the north of the original city, and then everything else was privately owned. So the Pueblo tract was part of the 500 lot lottery, and then the rest of these pertain to land grants, most of them in the 1840s. Next map. So this is one of them, which was part of the study for the Shelley subdivision landmark in Alameda Park Landmark District. This one has a really interesting history, which you can find online. This map done in, I think it was 1851, kind of shows some of the ecology that existed at that time, but also shows plotting and roads. Next.
Well, I'd just like to point out, on the left is San Jose, but that's the northern part of San Jose. So this is, north is maybe that way. So this is San Jose this way, and this is the Alameda going up to Santa Clara. And that is basically the Mission, right? Mission Santa Clara. And you can tell them about the green. I'm pretty sure the green is swampland.
Swampland, yes. This is Los Coches, and it was the next Rancho South that was owned by the the builder of the Adobe, which are friends from the
Roberto Bellarmino,
the California
and then
Historical
San Antonio Senor.
and others.
And then from that
And
point it
Digley
went
and,
to
yeah, so on and so forth.
others.
So, this map, which was 1860, somewhere around 1860, even though it had not been formally granted yet, it had already been subdivided and has all of the people who own various parcels. So this ended up being the fairgrounds. They identified as the fairgrounds here, right at the corner of the Alameda, where it's Race. This is Race.
Alameda and Race.
Alameda and Race, yeah. Eventually this became the Rose Garden, and this is like St. Leo's neighborhood right there.
Michael?
Yes.
Have you ever been able to decipher the writing, the handwriting there in the bottom left corner?
Actually, you can, the map is detailed enough that you can.
You can? Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
just
it's,
can't.
it can be accessed through the Santa Clara County Surveyor's website.
Yeah, over there.
Next. So, this is just to give you an idea of what it was like in the 1860s. So this was taken at the top of the courthouse, and just right when it finished getting built, or maybe it was under construction, and it shows north side. So my house is actually over right here somewhere. So I live in north side. And this is San Jose Institute, which is a private school. And
Where was that? The institute?
it was between First and Second, just north of, or just south of Julian Street.
Just south of what?
Julian Street.
Oh. Next.
Next. This by 1876, this is how the city was starting to develop. This is from the 1876 Thompson and West Atlas, of which there are many copies around. You can see them at the California Room. This line here I've always been interested in. This is called the township line. So throughout California, there were townships, which were voting districts for representatives or senators. And this township line divided San Jose Township and Redwood Township, which went all the way to Los Gatos. Next. This is a similar map, but it shows the city limits right here, the line of the western edge of the city limits. And as you can see on here, development was occurring on both the unincorporated areas and within the limits, which in the context I worked on, that becomes a really important thing, because it was difficult for the city to expand beyond the city limits because there were no public services. Next.
All right, I'm trying to figure out where this is, but I see College Square, that's Washington Square, and I see the fairgrounds on the
Yeah,
left.
so,
lower
no,
left.
College Square is where, Bellarmine is,
Yeah.
right here.
Oh, Holly Square is Bellarmine.
Yeah.
COP, College of Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so in the late 1860s, John Piper, he was an engineer who came into town, and the city hired him as the city engineer, and he came up with a plan of how to enable city growth to 100,000 people by building a sewer system that was sized for 100,000 people. At this time, there was around 12,000 people in San Jose, so he was very far-sighted. And every time sewers then after this got built in San Jose, they were always sized for the future growth of the original city, which is this is. Next. So I'll just briefly mention this. So I create these development areas for the city. The Long Depression was a major depression in the United States. There was a period of intense marketing of San Jose and Santa Clara Valley that occurred in the 1880s. Subdivision took off briefly until there was a financial panic in 1893, and then post-panic expansion till 1911, which is a key point because that's the first time that the city expanded since it was founded. 1911 was the Gardner annexation at the southwest edge of downtown, which was a big political event because there were a lot of people that did not want the city to expand and have to deal with the expansion of services. And then after that, during this period was the evolution of residence parks, which first started the whole concept of closed developments that were restricted to who could buy into them. It's also when a lot of new people were coming to San Jose of different ethnicities, specific, the two largest groups being Japanese and Italians, and other Mediterranean groups, but the Italians were the largest group. And then the developments of the primary period of residence parks. And then, as I mentioned, annexation started in 1911, and by World War II there had been 14. And then after World War II, there were about 5,000. So, next slide. How are we doing in time?
We got at most 20 minutes, and we want to get some
Yeah,
questions.
I want to get
so.
some questions. So, anyway, I included this because during the boom period when they were trying to attract people to San Jose, the city leaders were trying to attract people to come to San Jose to expand the horticultural period. The light tower was one of the key elements in marketing. Next slide. This brochure, which is fascinating. Oh no. Yeah, this one. There's only one copy in the city right now. It's at the California Room, and I had found it online because there's a copy in Chicago, so I found it in the California Room. But this was the first marketing brochure. Next slide. This is just a page from it. Next slide. And a fantastic lithograph that was done. There was a company back east that was doing lithographs of various cities at that time. Next slide.
Michael, what was the date on that one, before this one?
This is all 1887.
Okay, we were trying to figure out when St. Joseph's was,
What was it?
when St. Joseph's was built, the church. So.
It was in the 1880s.
But it's right there.
Because it was brick. This is the 1888 Rucker map, which was used as a marketing map to show that there were plenty of lots for people to build houses. Next. This is where the trolleys were expanding to. This is actually by the end of the century. Next. This is a very interesting map, USGS map. The first one in San Jose. It was surveyed in 1895 and printed in 1899, and every building in San Jose is shown on it as a dot. So we use it in our research to help us isolate building dates. This can be found online. Next. And then, of course, the 1906 photograph from a balloon right after the earthquake. This is on the Library of Congress website. It's like 120 megs if you want the full resolution one, because you can blow it up and see a lot of detail. And it was taken from kind of the center of downtown looking east. This is the portion showing north side where my house.
When you say in the second war, what is that?
Ward.
Ward, okay.
That's a typo. There's supposed to be a D there.
I just, and I could be saying this for almost any slide, but these quality pictures are rare, and you're seeing something very special. So again, kudos to Franklin for culling these incredible pictures that you see before you.
Franklin, weren't the schools called Fords instead of by their name? I mean, I think Lowell School was Ford once, and I don't.
Yeah, I think I've never been able to figure out exactly when the ward thing started and stuff. But but there were 4 wards, and then there were political divisions. But then there was a point where the city went back to at-large elections, so that we didn't have full
But then
wards.
they didn't have the Fords.
Yeah.
Thank
Next,
you.
you wanna do the next one?
Yeah. There's also these maps, and these are all on Library of Congress, high resolution. These are drawings of the city. There's one in 1869 looking from the north, 1875 looking from the south, and then there's 1886, which is harder to get a hold of, and also one in the 1890s, and then this is the best one, 1901. This is just a portion of the map, but it shows the detail, and when we're researching buildings, we could find buildings on this map if they're before 1901.
So when we think about the turn of the century, 1900, this is what we're looking at. You know, this density of population and the number of, open spaces, pretty awful.
Next slide. You just skip this one. And this map here, I mapped out the original city, and then the blue line is where the city had expanded to by 1941. And at that time, the population was, I forget, it's either 40,000 or 90,000, one of the two. Next. This is just, relates to the context I was writing, but it shows just some of the initial ideas come from the Chamber of Commerce of how the city should grow. Next. This right here is San Jose's first zoning map, which History San Jose has, the archive. And when it was developed, the plan was basically to convert everything in the center of the city into multifamily or industrial or commercial, and then just have single family out in the suburbs. And that's why a lot of the downtown developed so strangely where you have a house next to an apartment building, because starting in 1929, the city wanted apartment buildings in the downtown to replace houses. Next slide. And this is the Hulk map from the 1930s, when through, I think it was HUD, they were surveying all the cities in the United States to find out which areas were best to risk lending money. So the like the blue areas are considered prime, but if you lived in the yellow area, then it was harder to get a loan.
And
Next.
HOLC stands for?
Housing Ownership Loan Corporation, something like that.
It's a realty. So is this what you
Yeah, that's what, when people refer to redlining, that's the map they're referring to. And then this right here, when San Jose was the fastest growing city in the nation, this shows subdivision development, I think all of it. But there's online, there's an example of this, and it's linked from the context statement, but you could just search on, and probably find it, where it's a video, and each year shows the growth, so you can watch the city grow over its full history.
And I have shown that many, many years ago. I showed that to this class.
Next.
End of presentation.
Okay.
Great. Questions?
Do you think San Jose went downhill after 1960?
Well, I don't know, you know, I grew up here, it's a different place than it was when I grew up.
Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about, like, this personal life that you were here, and what was it like when you were here?
Well, you know, I grew up on 10th Street, where I still live right now, in a house that my father built in 1949. And I went to grade school, Peterman, now called Bologna.
Yeah.
And San Jose, and then I went off to college. But the image that I have is that the edge of town was Coyote Creek. And there was a cherry orchard right there at Coyote Creek and Taylor Street, which is now where, what's the park that's there, it's the park there. And it was the last, when I went to work in the planning department, I was involved with subdivisions and so forth. And I remember when the subdivision came in to tear down the last cherry orchard. So, you know, that's always been a strong memory of mine. I grew up cutting apricots on a relative's ranch off of Sylvandale, and during those days when you went to college, you'd come home and work in the canneries because you could make so much money. So I worked at cow canners and growers during the summers.
Is there, I'm sorry, can I get the card? I don't know where,
right here.
is it?
What hospital were you born in? Were you born in a hospital?
On O'Connor.
O'Connor, but the one,
Yeah, the old one.
the old one on Race and
Yeah,
the sanitarium, yeah.
Well,
and the doctor was.
My comment would be
Kempis.
each map,
Confusing.
each map is a class, okay? And I just feel like an accordion. It's exhausting.
Well, it was exhausting working on the project.
I want to present this to Franklin with great gratitude. Thank you very, very much for your presentation. And you're welcome anytime.